After half a century of service, one of my profs, Pierre Dufont, also deserves to be among these great figures. A professional, he was reassuring, deadpan delivery, and so on. And he was appreciated and respected. Michel Deshotels contributed to enlightening us to more intelligent debate and more humane debate. Thank you, Michel Deshotels. The Honourable Member for Bourassa. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, on the occasion of the 2023 edition of Men Who Stand Out, I had the privilege of awarding 5 men with the Member for Bourassa's Medal for Father's Day.
Welcome to the stream, everybody.
Carry out
I want to encourage you to give a like and subscribe if you're not already.
Impact and an inspiring impact on everyone who lives in the riding of Bourassa and beyond. I'm pleased to introduce them to the House of Commons. They are
Asio, Calogero Caruso, Jonas Loa Kwasi, Michel Lorange et de Feu,
and the late Félix Saint-Élien, who passed away, unfortunately, 3 days before the ceremony. Before their families, dignitaries, and guests, I paid tribute to each of the recipients. So, colleagues, join with me in congratulating these agents of change. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Or good afternoon, rather. I'd like to commend the courage and determination of 2 entrepreneurs who own a new company, the Allen Cheese Factory in Bellechasse. Caroline and Joseph Allen already operate an organic dairy farm. To start up the cheese factory, Joseph went back to school while Caroline was busy getting recognition for the quality of their milk. These 2 young entrepreneurs work countless hours. They're determined to position their dairy among the best. Their cheddar cheese is excellent, and they're already thinking of expanding their range of products. Their determination and professionalism have been recognized. In fact, their work was recently awarded after only 1 year in business. The Fromagerie Allen was awarded 2nd prize in the business creation category at the Défi aux Entreprendre Gala. Congratulations, Caroline and Joseph, for all your hard work and best wishes for the future.
Member for Canada, Carleton.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to acknowledge and celebrate the hundreds of high school students who are graduating in my riding of Canada, Carleton. To the students of A.Y. Jackson, Earl of March, Holy Trinity, Maurice-le-Point, and West Carleton, congratulations. I hope you look back on your high school years as wonderful memories with amazing teachers and fabulous friendships that will last a lifetime. As you look forward to this next chapter in your life, dream big. You've made it this far. You've proven you can do it. Imagine what you can do next. To the teachers that got you here, thank you. Thank you for your devotion to teaching and helping shape this next generation. To the parents, you've gotten them this far. Now it's time for them to spread their wings. So graduates, take your selfies, take your time celebrating, take it easy for a while, and then get ready to take on the world.
Oh, the Honourable Member
Aww.
Centre.
Mr. Speaker, today it is my honour to highlight the work of 25 young individuals who have dedicated their lives to progressing Canada through their volunteer work. These Surrey Board of Trade 25 under 25 have worked tirelessly to grow their communities and provide service to the world around them. Furthermore, these individuals go above and beyond to serve the citizens of Canada, especially within Surrey and in communities throughout the Lower Mainland. They have exceeded expectations by displaying their outstanding commitment in strengthening our neighbourhoods. These truly are our brightest members. One young man in particular I'd like to shout out is Zora here. Zora is an exceptional youth member who has demonstrated his perseverance and goodwill through his work with the Surrey Youth Council. He is a talented leader in Surrey, and he continues to provide his services out of passion. Zora, along with these 24 brilliant minds, are determined to uplift Canadians in their respected communities. Thank you.
The honourable member for Barrie, Springwater, Oro-Medonte.
Mr. Speaker, at a time when Canadians are struggling, this Liberal government continues to pour fuel on the inflationary fire by...
All right, everybody, I don't blame you if you want to click off the stream here and go watch the video I'm about to post on my main channel.
In Canada. To make matters worse, the Bank of Canada's...
But if I were you, I would do that.
...will be a disaster for...
Trudeau's being investigated by the RCMP. Video is live on MSB.
...who bought a home 5 years ago with a typical mortgage that is up for renewal will now, on average, pay $7,000 more a year in interest alone. In Barrie, this situation has become critical. I recently spoke to a local bank manager, and he indicated that their branch is currently working with 40 struggling families trying to keep their homes. Considering that there are over 30...
He is being investigated. Yep.
This could mean that approximately 1,500 families in my riding are in a similarly dire predicament. Canadians deserve better. They deserve a government that can bring home powerful paychecks, lower their taxes, and build more homes. Only a Conservative government can provide this relief that Canadians so desperately need.
Member for Humber River, Black Creek.
Today, I'd like to share some exciting news that would undoubtedly strengthen international trade and foster closer ties between Canada and Taiwan. Last week, Taiwan has taken a significant step by fully opening its market to imports of Canadian beef. This decision marks a momentous occasion not only for the Canadian beef industry, but also for the bilateral relations between Canada and Taiwan. This development will undoubtedly benefit both our countries. Taiwanese consumers will now have access to a wider range of safe, high-quality Canadian beef products, while Canadian farmers will gain access to an expanding market, boosting their export opportunities. Moreover, this milestone strengthens the foundation of cooperation and friendship between Canada and Taiwan. It paves the way for further collaboration in various sectors and enhances our economic partnership. Let us celebrate this positive development and embrace the opportunity it brings to foster greater trade, prosperity, and friendship between Canada and Taiwan. Thank you.
For Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has a plan to increase prices even more. Higher prices are official Liberal policy. Their out-of-control spending is fueling inflation. Their taxes and regulations drive up the price of energy. Higher energy prices means it's more expensive to purchase fertilizer to grow food. Higher energy prices means it's more expensive to harvest food. It's more expensive to transport food. Their Soviet-style sales quotas will make cars more expensive. Their streaming censorship law will make entertainment more expensive. Their annual alcohol tax increase makes having a beer more expensive. They even want to make it more expensive to go fishing. Higher prices are their policy. They will never rein in spending because higher inflation is what this Prime Minister wants. Every move you take, every breath you take, he'll be taxing you.
Oh my God! The Conservatives are so damn witty.
Canada has experienced
I'm sorry for screaming.
growth rate since the Great Depression, and the root cause of this problem is no great mystery. Liberal deficits have led to liberal inflation, which is driving a cost of living crisis, and Canadians are noticing it every time they go to the grocery store. Liberal inflation has also caused the Bank of Canada to raise interest rates 9 consecutive times. These interest rate hikes have turned the housing market into a ticking time bomb. As more and more Canadians are going to the bank to renew their mortgages at higher interest rates, many of them are finding that they can no longer afford to stay in their homes. But a new Conservative government will fix these problems so Canadians can stay in their homes. Your home, my home, our home. Let's bring it home.
Yeah, buddy.
The Honourable Member for Argenteuil-La-Petite-Nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to highlight a heroic act that took place in my riding of Argenteuil-La-Petite-Nation. On May 11th, Yann Pichet was out fishing with friends when he jumped into the Grenville Canal to save a 9-year-old girl swept away by the current. Despite the freezing cold water, he brought her safely to shore. The values Mr. Pichet embodied that day are those we all strive to promote and live by every day. May his example inspire each and every one of us to act with determination and humanity in the face of the challenges we face. Yan Pichet's courage and bravery deserve our utmost admiration. For this, in addition to the Certificate of Meritorious Act awarded by the Grenville Mayor Pierre, I'm proud to present him with an honorary certificate and medal bearing an image of the Canadian Parliament for his act of bravery. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is the International Day for the Elimination of Sexual Violence in Conflict. I honor all of the survivors and victims targeted by sexual violence in conflict zones. It's critically important that they receive all of the health and social supports that they need to recover. I also want to acknowledge the UN Resolution 2122, which upholds abortion rights for women and girls who experience sexual violence in conflict zones. Rape as a weapon of war is used to spread fear and exert control over people. We have seen it used in the Democratic Republic of the Congo by armed factions during the Tigray War and Russian soldiers in Ukraine and in many other places. This is a crime against humanity. Those who perpetrate these acts of sexual violence and leaders who allow it to take place need to be held accountable. On this day and every day, let's lift up survivors, demand justice for victims, and work to ensure that we end rape as a weapon of war once and for all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for...
Guys, this is going to be a wild question period. Oh, my God. Trudeau just got announced that he's being investigated.
I pay tribute today to an outstanding resident of my riding, Jacques Laplante. He died earlier in June. He started out as a teacher and a principal, and he left with many young people lessons that they will live by for the rest of their lives. Mr. Laplante was also known for working with seniors. He was the president of the Seniors Club and the Seniors Health Clinic. He was a separatist and became a separatist in the 70s and an active member of the PQ. His political and social involvement earned him Patriot of the Year in 2012. A man of heart, generosity, always smiling and generous, and proud, so proud to be a Quebecer. Mr. Laplante, you're an outstanding individual. We will never forget you. On behalf of the Bloc, I offer my sincerest condolences to his friends and family.
For Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's horrific and devastating opioid crisis is not an accident. The opioid crisis is happening because Purdue Pharma, liberal-friendly McKinsey, and other bad corporate actors aggressively marketed prescription opioids to those suffering from pain or addiction. These companies did everything possible to increase sales and left a trail of human misery in their wake. Today we learned from the Globe and Mail specifically that Purdue pitched in Canada, McKinsey pitched Purdue on turbocharging opioid sales. Now McKinsey has paid $500 million in compensation in the United States, but has still not admitted any wrongdoing and has paid no compensation in Canada. Shamefully continue to pour money into this company. Now on May 29th, this House held a vote on my amendment calling on the government to sue the companies responsible for causing and fueling the opioid crisis for all damages associated with the crisis and direct all funds recovered through such litigation, prevention, treatment, and recovery programs. Liberals and New Democrats voted against that amendment. The opioid crisis was a result of corporate marketing and made some close friends of this Liberal government very rich. Those who got rich through the opioid crisis should pay for the recovery.
The honourable member for Fredericton.
Mr. Speaker, June 21st is the first day of the summer solstice, the day of the year with the longest light and the promise of warmer days ahead. It's also a day for all Canadians to find ways to honour and celebrate the diversity and vibrancy of First Nations, Métis and Inuit peoples through National Indigenous Peoples Day. To the First Nation communities in my riding, Sidunsis and Willamuggatuck, Waliwin, for being leaders and land guardians of our beautiful region, for being economic forces, for celebrating and sharing your culture, heritage and identity, and for your strength and triumph in the face of centuries of colonialism. Activities and events are organized across Wabanaki territory, including in Ekpahug, where Wolastoqey Tribal Council, Jedi and Mawil Council, in partnership with the City of Fredericton, will host a special gathering on the lawn of the provincial legislature with drumming, dancing, games, food, and more. There will also be a celebration in Carleton Park throughout the day with live music and art that honors the rich heritage of the Wolastoq Gawiag. We are at a time in our history where we are collectively engaging on the path of reconciliation, a path of healing and reclaiming, a path of transforming who we are and who we want to be, and Indigenous peoples are leading the way. Happy National Indigenous Peoples Day.
Okay.
Oral
questions. Question orale. Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Holy crap, buckle up.
After 8 years of this Prime Minister, the cost of housing has doubled. The cost of a mortgage or the cost of the average house has doubled. Monthly payments for mortgages have doubled. Rent has doubled. And now the Minister has added $60 billion more in inflationist deficit, $4,500 per Canadian family. When will the Minister finally balance the budget to reduce inflation and interest rates? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, our economic plan has found a good balance between fiscal responsibility and compassion. And that is the reason for which in July we will offer a reimbursement for groceries to the tune that will help 11 million families that need it. That is why we provide dental care to Canadian families that need it. And that is why we will invest more than $100 billion in our green transition, whilst maintaining the lowest deficit in the G7. The only thing that she has done and the Prime Minister is doing after 8 years is increasing taxes on food. They have now promised
on purpose, by the way,
new carbon tax that will apply to Quebec, even though Quebec is the greenest province even in the world. Now, with the support of the Bloc Québécois, the Liberals want to impose a 20 cent per litre tax on farmers, on consumers, which will increase the cost of food. Will they cancel this tax so that Quebecers can finally eat? The Honourable Minister for the Environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that many people are watching us today at home and they're wondering. Over the past few months, there have been record floods. There have been record tropical storms, and now we have record wildfires. Why?
Because people are lighting the fires?
Why do the Conservatives continue to be obstinate when it comes to denying climate change? Not a single question on climate change. Tens of thousands of people have had to be displaced by climate change. Where is the Conservatives' plan to help Canadians in order to adapt to climate change?
What is nowhere is their environmental plan. They don't have an environmental plan. After 8 years of raising taxes on consumers, they still can't hit their targets. And they seem to suggest that if Canadians were just forced to pay more for gas, groceries, and heat, that forest fires would stop. Mr. Speaker, that is ridiculous. All that has happened is a 40-year high in food price inflation. 1 in 5 Canadians skipping meals because they can't afford food. 1.5 million going to food banks. Now, Mr. Speaker, they want a 61 cent a litre carbon tax. Well, they axe the tax so Canadians can afford to eat.
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
So, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party of Canada say that if they were in power, they would work through technology to reduce pollution. It's
The Honourable Minister, you've got about 20 seconds left, please.
Interestingly enough, Mr. Speaker, they had 10 years.
It's a zoo today.
When they were in power. My friend and colleague, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, does more for clean technologies on an average day before his first coffee, Mr. Speaker, than they did in 10 years.
Whoa, hey. Let's not lie here.
Years is reduce emissions while the economy grew, which proves the following quote. I take great exception to the federal minister always forcing this into a dichotomous issue. Either you believe in exactly what we say or you don't believe in climate change. That's completely illogical. It's completely false dichotomy. It's a false dilemma, and it's as insulting as it is simplistic. Who said that? The Liberal Premier of Newfoundland. He says the carbon tax will bring inflationary pressures to his people. Why won't they listen to the Liberal Premier and axe the tax?
The Liberal cabinet's collapsing.
You sit in this house and you listen every day, but I'd like to do another history lesson if you'd let me. The previous government had a Secretariat for Rural Economic Development. This government, which they axed, by the way, Mr. Speaker, it was this government that put in place a standalone Department of Rural Economic Development, whose number one issue and mandate is to connect the country from coast to coast to coast, because that is the equalizer. High-speed, affordable internet. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, I was in the member opposite's riding last week and made a $71 million announcement in partnership with the government of Ontario to connect the riding of Carleton. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Shows how out of touch they are. They think that what rural Canadians want is another big government bureaucracy in Ottawa, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
What they actually want is more money in their own pockets. But the plan,
less government,
member, is to raise taxes on Newfoundland customers, to bring in a 61-cent a litre carbon tax on Newfoundlanders, Labradorians, and all Canadians. They will drive up the cost of heat, gas, and groceries. Even the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland says it won't help the environment, it will cause inflation. Why won't they axe the tax?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 years ago, Atlantic Premier has asked us to delay by 2 years the implementation of our clean fuel regulations, which was something the Conservative Party campaigned on during the last campaign, Mr. Speaker. We did exactly that. We listened to the Atlantic Premiers. We delayed the implementation of that important piece of regulation to ensure that Canadians have access to cleaner fuels all across the country, and it's already generating billions of dollars of investment throughout the country, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, the session ends on Friday. The government has 4 sleeps left to announce a commission of inquiry into Chinese interference.
Yep.
So with all due respect, it needs to stop sleeping. We need an official commission of inquiry. The person appointed must be subject to the approval of this House. And all of this must be announced by Friday if we want this commission to be able to publish its conclusions before the next elections. Mr. Speaker, will the government finally get down to work? Will it immediately announce a public and independent commission of inquiry? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, the work has already begun. I would like to reassure my colleague and all members in this House there will be new powers for CSIS, new mechanisms for transparency, and now with constructive exchanges that are managed by my colleague, the Minister for Intergovernmental Affairs, in order to find the best path to work and consult Canadians as to how we can better protect our institutions. The Honourable Member for La Prairie, Mr. Speaker, what, roughly speaking, is the record of this government in this session of the House? It's having wasted 4 months fighting a commission of inquiry into Chinese interference. That's what observers will remember. Unless the government takes action between now and Friday. Mr. Speaker, the public is anxious for a commission to finally get down to work.
Hell yeah, we are.
Anxious too. I can confirm that on good authority, and I'm sure that no one is as eager to move on to the next stage as the government. So why not do it immediately by announcing a new commission? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, that is exactly the focus of our exchanges with the Minister for Intergovernmental Affairs and the Bloc Québécois and the NDP, and I hope the Conservatives as well. But I would like to reassure everyone that many actions have already been taken with new powers, new measures, new authorities to better protect not only our democratic institutions, but also Canadians. There are investments in the 2023 budget to add resources for the RCMP, and that is exactly our record, and will continue.
Add resources to the RCMP, that's great. They're about to investigate Trudeau.
Speaker, fires are still ravaging our regions. People are fleeing their homes, and our children are breathing in smoke on their way to school. What is the government's response? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. This Prime Minister has promised billions to combat the climate crisis, but we learn that these billions are sitting in government coffers whilst our forests burn. What will it take for this government to finally release these funds so that we can finally at least have one chance of perhaps one day, perhaps winning the fight against the climate emergency? The Honourable Minister for the Environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and our thoughts go out, of course, to the tens of thousands of people that have been displaced by the forest fires, and we would like to wholeheartedly thank all those who are in the field trying to help the situation. My honourable colleague should remember that we have shown that greenhouse gas emissions have gone down by 50 million tonnes. We have the best record for all G7 countries between 2019 and 2021. I'd like to remind my honourable colleague that the pandemic was everywhere in the world. So we had the best record despite the pandemic. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, I listened carefully to the interpretation, but I didn't detect even a hint of an answer to my colleague's excellent question. Simply promising to invest in the fight against climate change means nothing if those dollars don't make it out the door. And time is of the essence. Our country is burning.
We're gonna melt tomorrow.
In horror.
I'm just going to. I'm having a hard time hearing the question, and it's not it's just people talking to each other more than anything.
Give us more money, or we're going to melt.
If you're going to have a conversation, please just take it into the lobby. If the honourable member can start from the top so we can hear the question, please.
Mr. Speaker, I listened carefully to the interpretation, but I didn't detect even a hint of an answer to my colleague's excellent question. Simply promising to invest in the fight against climate change means nothing if those dollars don't make it out the door. Time is of the essence. Our country is burning, and the next generation is looking on in horror. How can the minister justify dragging his feet on the most important issue of our time?
Sure.
Yeah, we are going to melt and we're going to catch fire.
Mr. Speaker, this is the most important issue of our time, which is why we've invested billions of dollars, which is why we're deploying regulations. Let me talk about the National Adaptation Strategy. This is what Climate Proof Canada had to say about it. Climate Proof Canada applauds the Government of Canada on a world-leading national adaptation strategy. Let's talk about the Insurance Bureau of Canada. Canada's first national adaptation strategy is brave and ambitious. No other country has proposed such a comprehensive and suite of adaptation targets. We are working to help Canadians prepare for the impacts of climate change, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, the changes this government made with Bill C-83 allowed Paul Bernardo's unacceptable transfer from a maximum security prison to a medium security prison. They therefore have all the powers necessary to reverse this transfer. The Minister for Public Safety has proved his incompetence time and time again. Will the Prime Minister finally accept his responsibilities, clean up the mess he has made, and finally sack the Minister?
Reminder to drop a like on the stream if you haven't yet.
Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, the definition of competence is one of being a champion for victims, and that is what I did when I was informed on the 30th of May that Paul Bernardo was going to be transferred to a medium security prison. And I will continue to work hand in hand with representatives from families of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey. And yes, we have published new directives to make sure that future decisions are joined with information for family victims.
The Minister of Public Safety either knew or ought to have known that Paul Bernardo was being transferred to medium security. To say otherwise is not credible. The Minister is at the top of the org chart in his department. He has dozens of political staff and high-level officials. They all report to him. If it's true that he didn't know, then he's grossly incompetent. The Minister must take responsibility, be accountable, and resign.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, as I have made clear now on a number of occasions, I have taken corrective steps to ensure that briefing protocols are provided in a timely manner, especially when it comes to sensitive decisions involving the transferring of dangerous offenders like Paul Bernardo. As soon as I found out, I contacted the Commissioner to express the concerns of the Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French families. That's precisely what the responsibility of this position is, as well as issuing new instructions to assure this kind of thing doesn't happen again. Thank you.
The honourable member for South Surrey White Rock.
As long as that monster is in medium security, the minister's weak directive means nothing. Under the last Conservative government, we provided for necessary restrictions. These Liberals and this minister scrapped that threshold to provide that all prison inmates be placed in the least restrictive environment possible. He allowed this to happen. This minister is responsible for this outrageous transfer. He is not a passive observer in this travesty. He should resign.
Yes, sir. Or yes, ma'am.
Far from being merely an observer, I've been active in advocating for victims' rights,
observer,
those of the families of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, because I hope, like all members, I share great compassion for them and sympathy given the, no doubt, the re-traumatization that they've had to endure. On the contrary to what Conservatives have said, Mr. Speaker, this new instruction is stronger than anything the Conservatives ever did when it came to victims' rights, Mr. Speaker. And if they were so worried about it, then why did they cut $300 million in their last year of government to the Correctional Service of Canada? We know why. They're all talk. They're no action.
The honourable member for...
You should resign, buddy.
Mr. Speaker, another Liberal insider, Dominic Barton, close friend of the Prime Minister, has harmed Canadians. Today we learned the Prime Minister's favourite consulting company, McKinsey Canada, which was run by Barton, laid out plans to supercharge the sales and marketing of OxyContin to Canadians. Almost 36,000 Canadians have died during this epidemic created by McKinsey and Barton, and it's only getting worse. Why does this Liberal government continue to reward McKinsey, who has profited from the suffering of Canadians with hundreds of millions of dollars in government contracts?
Hear, hear.
That is a very fair question.
Public Services.
And as a physician with my colleague, the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, we know firsthand the harm caused by opioid addiction. While the leader of the official opposition continues to oppose safe supply, our government is focused on saving.
Oh, wow. Of course she can't answer anything.
To serve Canadians.
She doesn't understand North American English.
That means working to improve Canada's integrity regime brought in by the previous government so that we can better safeguard procurement policies and practices. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Sturgeon River Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, recent media reports confirm that there is an active, ongoing RCMP in relation to prosecutorial interference on the 2019 SNC Lavalin scandal. My question to the government is a simple yes or no question. Is the Prime Minister, any member of Cabinet or their staff currently under investigation by the RCMP? Yes or no?
There it is.
The Honourable Government House Leader. Okay, very good. Sorry, I missed that.
No one stood up?
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent.
What is that?
Inaudible for the interpretation. The Prime Minister of Canada was threw out Julie Wilson-Raybould because she didn't want to be political in a judicial matter. Now we have a very sad affair in front of us. Can the Prime Minister rise today in the House and confirm that neither he nor anyone else from his cabinet have been investigated by the RCMP? The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House, Mr. Speaker. I've already answered questions.
Oh, the Liberals are so screwed.
Of course, the Conservative Party are trying to pick partisan fights, and I've already answered. The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, ministers are aware of nothing. It's strange to hear that, but that is a major part of this government's sessional record. The Minister for Public Safety knew nothing about the transfer of Paul Bernardo, even though his employees did. The Prime Minister also knew nothing, just as he knew nothing about China's threats against the MP for Wellington.
Crazy how little these guys actually know.
Minister for Emergency Preparedness. All ministers, all unaware of anything. Mr. Speaker, the public will no longer accept this response. When will the government stop pleading ignorance? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, that is exactly what I have reinforced as Minister of Public Safety, to make sure that myself and the government in general have all the information necessary. We have a very strong record with new powers, new transparency mechanisms, and we are always ready to work hand in hand, not only with the Bloc, but with all other members of the House. Thank you, Mrs.
You gotta be the stupidest person to believe anything these guys say.
The government's response is perhaps worse than the situation itself. It says that it has given instructions to inform ministers from here on in about hot issues that concern them, such as the transfer of prisoners of interest or threats against elected officials. Mr. Speaker, this government has been in office since 2015, and it tells us that it has just required ministers to be informed of their files. This raises an ethical question. Which is worse? Ministers who know nothing, or ministers who wait until the 8th year of government to demand to be informed about their actual files?
Ooh. Let's try and get to 500 likes, everybody. Try and smash that button.
Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I believe that there's a bit of a good mood on the other side, but I'm always ready to work with members of the Bloc Québécois, even if they give us a lot of jokes in the House of Commons. There are many files to work on, and we are ready to work with them. The Honourable Member for Salaire-Berry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, this government has abdicated any notion of ministerial responsibility during this session. They are happy to be accountable when things are going well. They're always there for the good news. But when things go poorly, they apparently know nothing, and they avoid hot topics.
Funny how that works.
Chinese interference. They even blame the media for publishing fake news. That's completely irresponsible. Mr. Speaker, governing means being accountable when things go well and when they go badly. It means being responsible at all times. They'll have to prove it over the next few months. Are they still tempted? The Honourable Minister.
Those great points.
Mr. Speaker, to be responsible is to act where there are challenges, and that is exactly my record. When there are challenges on sharing information, when there were challenges, I strengthened protocol. I worked on foreign interference, on the transfer of federal offenders. And yes, we always have to work together with all members, including the Bloc Québécois. It is very important.
Well, member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, massive Liberal deficits cause inflation, which cause interest rate hikes, which leads to mortgage defaults. The IMF warns that Canada is at the greatest risk for mortgage defaults of any country that it tracks. The solution is to stop the deficits, which stops inflation, which stops interest rate hikes, which will stop defaults. But the finance minister knows this. She said as much last fall. So when will she table her plan to rein in her deficits?
Good question. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in our Article 4 consultation with the IMF actually said that Canada has the strongest fiscal position.
Oh my God.
That we have the lowest deficit in the G7 and the lowest debt to GDP ratio. The IMF commended our investments in the green economy and our early learning and childhood.
That's her only talking point.
Canada is doing very well relative to its peers in a complicated global economy.
Here, here.
Honourable Member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
That's cold comfort to families that don't know what they're going to do when their mortgage comes up for renewal.
That's right.
Inflation caused by Liberal deficits mean that Canadians can't afford groceries. Canadians are increasingly buying food on credit and struggling to pay their bills. Equifax Canada reports that Canadians are going deeper into debt and defaults are rising. When will this Liberal government get control of its spending so that Canadians can take back control of theirs?
Oh, man.
Deputy Prime Minister.
We all agree with that.
It's not just the IMF that confirms the strength of Canada's fiscal position. After we tabled the budget, S&P reiterated our AAA rating. But let's talk a little bit about what the Conservatives would do. The Conservatives would eviscerate pensions for Canada's seniors. The Conservatives would destroy, impoverish the EI system that so many Canadians depend on. The Conservatives would starve our healthcare system of essential investment. And of course, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives would make pollution free again. That would be devastating for Canadians and Canadian families.
Honourable member for Simcoe Grey.
Mr. Speaker, rate hikes are on the rise again. The Liberals' record debt level has led to 40-year high inflation and the highest interest rate in 22 years. Higher Liberal taxes were already making Canadians poorer. Now interest rates will make owning and renting more expensive. Conservatives have been asking for a plan to balance the budget, but the NDP Liberal coalition just laughs and spends more. Now the IMF warns that Canada is at the highest risk of mortgage defaults amongst advanced economies. How many Canadians need to lose their homes before this government presents a plan to balance the budget?
Hear, hear.
Yeah, budgets balance themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a very timely question. In fact, timing is important here because part of the budget is support dental care for children in this country. It's been 19 days, Mr. Speaker, since we've written to the leader of the opposition, the Conservative leader, and asked him what he thought about the 1,000+ children in his riding and the 1,000 children in the MP's riding, why these children would not deserve the dental care that members of this House have enjoyed for many months and in some cases 2 decades, Mr. Speaker. So we're curious to hear their answer.
The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
And he would gladly provide you one.
Attawapiskat is in a humanitarian crisis that's gotten worse year by year under this Liberal government. Overcrowded homes, unsafe drinking water, and no matter what Attawapiskat does to try and get ahead, they can't because they don't even have a proper land base to build houses. Right. The government calls the land of the Mushkegowuk Cree Crown land. It is treaty land, and the people of Attawapiskat have a right to develop the land for their people. So to the Indigenous Affairs Minister, what steps will she take to work with Attawapiskat on building a livable community that offers hope to the young?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, it was a privilege to meet with the community members and Chief of Attawapiskat this morning, where the member was also present. And we talked about a roadmap together to make sure that Attawapiskat has the tools it needs and the financial support of the federal government to move forward. I agree with the member. Every person in this country must feel that they can reach their full potential.
This chick looks
and
evil.
that there's hope for their children. And together with the leadership of Attawapiskat, we're going to do
She's
exactly
got those eyes.
The honourable member for Nunavut.
Last week, Indigenous police chiefs of Ontario came to Ottawa to demand that the government reinstate their core funding to help keep their communities safe. The minister promised to provide 3 months of funding as quickly as possible. People are dying as they wait for him to fulfill that promise. The minister needs to stop playing games with the safety of 45 First Nations. When will the funding be reinstated with the terms and conditions that respects the rights of Indigenous peoples?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, as I updated the House last week, I want to assure my colleague that we are working very closely with the community, including through leadership representatives like Chief Kailu, to ensure that we can get funding flowing back to the community, to ensure that there is public safety on the ground. We want to have these discussions in a way that is constructive. We obviously want to solve the longer-term challenges around First Nations policing, which at its core must involve the empowerment of First Nations communities.
How can anyone actually believe what he's saying?
And I will work closely with my colleague across the way to achieve that goal. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Sudbury.
Speaker, advancing reconciliation means investing in Indigenous-led businesses and ensuring we build a resilient economy that is both inclusive and looks forward towards the future. Can the Minister of Indigenous Services update the House on what this government has done recently to strengthen and advance the economic development of First Nations in Northern Ontario?
Minister of Indigenous Services.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for Sudbury for understanding and advocating for an inclusive economy where Indigenous entrepreneurs, Indigenous communities have all the tools of economic success. And indeed, that's exactly how FedNor has been transitioning to support Indigenous economies, to support economic reconciliation. Today, FedNor is investing over $8.2 million in new targeted investments to Indigenous-led initiatives across Northern Ontario. It's going to support Indigenous business leaders, communities, and organizations, foster the incredible talent of our communities all across Northern Ontario. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Experts across Canada and the world are sounding the alarm bells. The Liberal government deficits are causing mortgage defaults because of inflation driving the interest rate hikes. One mortgage broker in Ontario said it may be the last straw. Washington and Paris are taking note as well. The IMF and the OECD have singled out Canada as the nation with the highest risk of mortgage defaults. Mr. Speaker,
imagine that.
The minister listen to domestic and international experts and end his inflationary deficit spending.
We have the best AAA rating.
Mr. Speaker, in fact, both the IMF and the OECD have forecast that Canada will have the strongest economic growth in the G7 this year and next year. The IMF has further commended Canada for our very strong fiscal position and has pointed out that Canada continues to have not only the lowest deficit in the G7, but the lowest debt to GDP ratio. And let me remind the members opposite that notwithstanding their efforts to talk Canada down, we enjoy a AAA credit.
I knew it!
Honourable member for...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I've seen the script.
Of this government's inflationary deficit spending on Canadian mortgage holders is already at a head, driving up interest rates to the highest in 22 years. Senior economists across the Canadian banking sector have all indicated that another hike in July is likely, another cost of living hike on top of their carbon tax hike. Mr. Speaker, at what point will this government stop footing middle-class Canadians with the bill for their poor economic fiscal stewardship?
The Honourable Minister for Housing.
Speaker, at what point would the Conservative Party actually have
fucking knew it. She's like a broken record, man.
Housing? At what point will they stop gatekeeping real help for Canadian renters? At what point will they stop gatekeeping rapid housing initiative investments? At what point will they include homelessness in their half-baked housing plan? Let them get serious about housing before they lecture us about anything.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. After 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, Canadians' financial situation has never been so dire. After 8 years of this Liberal government, about half of Canadian families say that they cannot handle an unexpected having to spend $500. And what's a Liberal solution? Oh, they want to tax an additional 20 cents per litre on gas that Quebecers will buy. That'll be an average of over $400 per family. It makes no sense. Can the Liberals get out of the way rather than making the situation of Canadian families even worse, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Deputy President.
Even if you're not political, man, you got to be wondering, what the hell is our government doing?
Mr. Speaker, we won't be taking any lessons from...
She looks like she just got out of bed.
When it comes to
what's up with that?
The most
Come on.
Canadians deal with the cost of living.
Put some pride in yourself, Freeland.
We are the ones who implemented the Canada Child Benefit, which is indexed to inflation. The benefit lifted 435,000 Canadian children out of poverty. Our government increased the GIS, which is also indexed to inflation, and has helped countless seniors. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, 36,000 Canadians have been killed by opioids since January 2016, and
they don't care. They fund it. We pay for the drugs.
We worked with opioid manufacturers who targeted doctors and pharmacists to increase opioid sales in Canada. Can you believe that? Former CEO Dominic Barton gave free advice to the Liberal government, which in turn gave McKinsey at least $116 million in contracts, many of those without tender. So instead of rewarding the firm, will the Prime Minister cancel all of McKinsey's contracts because of its role in the opioid crisis? The Honourable Mental Health Minister.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker.
Oh, my God.
Since 2018, our government...
She looks like she tries out all the drugs before talking about them.
...on lawsuits against big pharmaceutical companies, including a specific group suit against McKinsey. Class action. Canada has also cracked down on predatory practices by pharmaceuticals by restricting marketing of opioids. The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Baie-James, Nunavik EU. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois is still monitoring the wildfires near Lebel, sur Quévillon, and elsewhere in Quebec. We're standing by the residents. Back home, the fire is growing. They're calling for 35-degree weather this week and no rain until Sunday. People are worried, and our businesses
people are worried.
They feel that nothing's being done to compensate for their losses. On Monday, the government pledged to do more to support affected communities. What will the government do for affected regions in Quebec, especially Abitibi-Témiscamingue and Nord du Québec? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for her question. We, of course, stand with all those who are involved and with first responders, too. In Quebec and everywhere in Canada, we are following wildfire situations very closely. We're working directly with the province, and we're in constant communication with the province to ensure that they have all of the supports and resources that they need. Following a request from the province, we also deployed the Canadian Armed Forces to contribute to the fight. We also have firefighters coming from around the world to help. So together, we will fight these wildfires, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government committed to doing more for people in our communities, like our region. But the government also committed to doing more to prevent disasters linked to climate change. And that also means doing more for our region because these natural disasters cannot keep recurring all the time. We know that the combination of fires and climate change increases the risk of fire. Fires also make the forests emit more greenhouse gases, which means more fires means more fires. Mr. Speaker, what is the government really doing to stop this downward spiral? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for bringing up another important issue related to wildfires. We know that climate change has a direct impact on forest fires and also on floods and tornadoes. Today, with the Canadian Army, we are helping. We have a coalition with foreign nations.
Yeah, they love coalitions.
We have an action.
He has a red chili pepper on his suit. What the hell?
People in affected ridings recently. And
what are these people doing?
People are doing great work on the ground. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Spending and big deficits by the Liberals have accomplished one thing, big inflation. Well, actually, it's accomplished two things. Canadian food bank use has never been higher because Canadians can't afford to put food on the table. Here are the consequences of the accomplishments of Liberal inflation and carbon taxes. In 2021, about 2 million Canadians accessed a food bank every single month. That more than doubled to 5 million last year. This year, a staggering 8 million Canadians are accessing a food bank every single month. How much more will Canadians have to pay to put food on the table when the Liberals implement a second carbon tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I seem to have to remind the members across the way that since this government came into power, we've lifted over 450,000 children in this country out of poverty. Since 2016, with the CCB, since implementing the dental care benefit, we've lifted 11 million Canadians.
Come on, speak up.
Have safety and security in their homes. Mr. Speaker, the real question Canadians want to know.
Let's go, Caterpillar Brows.
Cut. What will they take away from Canadian families? Will they take away dental care? Will they take rental assistance? Will they take away a grocery rebate? We are here for Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Foothills.
The parents of those children are now facing an impossible choice. pay their mortgage, or put food on the table. And the Liberals' answer to this crisis, higher spending, higher inflation, and another carbon tax. The consequences of that, an average Alberta family will be paying $4,000 a year in additional taxes. Alberta farmers will be paying as much as $150,000 a year on carbon tax 1. When you add taxes and costs to food production and transportation, it adds to the cost of the grocery store shelf. Will the Liberals cancel both carbon taxes so farmers can afford to produce the food so Canadians can afford to buy it?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister for Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the honourable member knows, on-farm fuel are exempted from farms. They don't pay taxes. And as the Parliamentary Budget Officer has already admitted in his report last week, there's $600 million of carbon taxes that have not been collected. In 2030, it'll be 1.5 that have not been charged to farmers. As for the other point, he knows full well this is a good policy for canola farmers everywhere in Canada.
The Honourable Member for Beauce.
Oh.
Mr. Speaker, we are experiencing a cost of living crisis.
I want me some fried chicken after looking at this guy.
Food banks is at an all-time high. Gas prices are skyrocketing, and families in Beauce are suffering as a result. On July 1st, things are only going to get worse. In Quebec, the second carbon tax will add $436 to every family's expenses, plus GST. This measure affects everyone's ability to get to work, but also, above all, to put food on the table. Will the government finally wake up and put an end to carbon tax
2.0? I can't believe they're adding a second carbon tax, man.
Mr. Speaker, in a recent survey, it was revealed that 83% of Canadians believe that the current wildfires are linked to climate change and that the situation will worsen. However, the Conservative Party doesn't seem to have any opinions about climate change. Is my colleague outraged about the fact that between 2019 and 2021, things have worsened? Does the member across the way oppose incredibly high prices?
Mr. Speaker, sadly we are seeing the rise of anti-2SL LGBT.
Oh, give me a break.
Having a devastating impact on the community. It was this Liberal government that banned the terrible, harmful practice of conversion
the kids
therapy.
alone.
It's sad to see an aspiring member of this House,
Say with me.
picked by the opposition leader, defending
the kids
the destructive practice
alone.
of spiritually counseling someone out of who they love. Can the minister reiterate for all Canadians our government's
What was that? Oh, you're right. Leave the kids alone.
The honourable member?
For the people in the back, leave the kids
to the
alone.
For her important question. We are celebrating Pride in the midst of rising anti-2S LGBTQI+ hate. And Mr. Speaker, I am so proud that our government banned the dangerous practice of so-called conversion therapy. Survivors I speak to tell me this law saves lives. And there's a lot more to do, but Mr. Speaker, we're on the right track. While Conservatives try to take us backward by promoting this dangerous practice, we will always stand on the side of the queer community.
Leave the kids alone, lady.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government's ever-increasing fixation on carbon taxes is damaging Canada's global agricultural advantage. True. It hurts farmers' profit margins, while at the same time the cumulative costs are pushed onto Canadian consumers. Will this government scrap Carbon Tax 1 and, at least for the sake of Canadian consumers, stop the implementation of Carbon Tax 2 planned for this 1st of July?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my honourable colleague for this question. Again, I'll repeat, climate change costs money to farmers by not acting. In 2021, 30% of the grains out west didn't make it to market. That is money that is supposed to go into farmers' pockets. And because of climate change, it hasn't made it into farmers' pockets. One thing that we're working on, as of July 1st, farmers will have a new opportunity, and I ask him to talk to his canola farmers because they're all on side. They'll be able to participate in a new economy, and this is great for farmers.
The honourable member for Peace River Westlock.
Mr. Speaker, the carbon tax hasn't stopped any floods, fires, or met any targets. It has done absolutely nothing to help the environment. The Liberals seem to like paying the carbon tax to assuage their conscience for their jet-setting lifestyle. Meanwhile, working families in Alberta are struggling to make ends meet. With carbon tax 2 coming into effect on July 1st, the average Alberta family will pay $4,000 in carbon tax. When will the minister admit that his carbon tax is a tax plan and does nothing to help the environment?
They will never admit it.
The environment.
Unfortunately.
So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to correct the record. Our pollution level has gone down by 50 million tons between 2019 and 2021. That's the equivalent of removing from our roads 11 million vehicles. And despite what they're saying, Mr. Speaker, we have the best performance in terms of cutting pollution than all G7 countries now. If the Conservative Party believed in climate change, they would have something to say about it. There's no switch to fight climate change, Mr. P.
We're all gonna die, man!
That will make climate change go away. There's no magic wand. Only hard work will make this possible. That's what we're doing on this side of the House. Unfortunately, they have nothing to say on that on the Conservative side.
Ron Bruce.
The reality, the Environment Minister's numbers is he shut the economy down for 2 years. That's the only way he met his targets. Next week, kids across Canada are going to be looking forward to their summer break. Dreams of baseball and soccer tournaments, maybe a modest camping trip, maybe even go to Toronto and watch the Blue Jays. That's what they're looking forward to. But unfortunately, the Liberals on July 1st are bringing in another carbon tax, $2,300 a year to Ontario households. Their dreams of a summer holiday are vanishing. When are Liberals going to get off of Canadians' backs?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, you know what I would say to those kids who are ready to go on vacation or watch a ball game? That we need to make sure we do everything that they have a planet, that they inherit an environment that they can live in. Then, Mr. Speaker, if we don't take action on climate change,
we're all gonna die!
We'll be able to afford things in the future because the cost of climate change will be enormous, but it also means that they will inherit a planet that is not sustainable. That is a legacy we cannot allow, Mr. Speaker. We will do everything on this side to make sure they inherit a planet that is there for them and their generations forward.
You can't make this up.
The Honourable Member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Southern Ontario is home to close to 90% of Canada's automotive manufacturing sector. Last week we had Project Arrow on the Hill, the first all-Canadian-made electric vehicle led by APMA, the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association. I was happy to be with Flavio Volpe of APMA to announce this incredible vehicle in Vaughan in 2021. Can the minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario please inform the House of the investments our government has made and will continue to make in electric vehicles in Ontario? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Vaughan Woodbridge for that important question. Our government is committed to establishing a Made in Canada plan for electric vehicles, and I would like to thank and its leadership. In Canada, Mr. Speaker, we have a strong advantage. And
we have a really strong advantage.
The enormous potential and the ability to turn ideas into reality. That's why our government provided over $5 million to APMA for this incredible project. We have and will continue to invest in industry leaders to create a strong economy.
It'll be the strongest economy.
Mr. Speaker, the minister gave $560 million to a company owned by Loblaws to deliver services to veterans. But the rollout was a disaster. Poor communications to service providers and veterans, lack of training for workers, and veterans and their families are the ones that are paying the price. The Liberals' outsourcing to private companies isn't working, and the government isn't listening. Will the minister continue to ignore veterans, or will he cancel this botched contract?
Honourable Minister for Veterans Affairs.
I thank my honourable colleague for her question and for her help with veterans, but I can tell her we will not cut vital services to veterans or slash funding to Veterans Affairs like the previous Conservative government did. The rehab contract will provide over 14,000 veterans with access to nearly 12,000 professionals in 800 locations right across the country. As Minister of Veterans Affairs, it is my responsibility to provide for veterans where they need it, when they need it, and we will continue to do that. Thank you, Mr.
Well, he's not doing a very good job.
Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, while Indigenous people make up only 5% of the population at women's prisons across the country, like Grand Valley Institution in my community, over half the prisoners are Indigenous. Worse still, 96% of those in isolation, almost every person is Indigenous. I'm embarrassed to live in a country where this is the case. It's what modern-day colonialism looks like. When will the government address this ongoing injustice?
All right, Green Party, sit down and sing Kumbaya.
Mr. Speaker, first I want to begin by sharing the outrage of my honourable colleague, and I'm committed to working with him with regards to this important issue.
Don't believe him, he's lying.
Put in place the initial steps to strengthen the independent panels that review the use of structured intervention units vis-a-vis Indigenous peoples in terms of representation, in terms of the ability to oversee this work. I also want to assure him that by putting in place a new Deputy Commissioner of Correctional Services that is focused on Indigenous priorities and affairs, that we can channel our efforts to address the long-lasting effects of colonialism. This is the way in which we take the concrete steps towards reconciliation. Thank you.
And that's all the time we have.
That's all the time we have for...
Guys, I've seen this script. I know exactly how this plays out.
The Honourable Deputy...
The Honourable Deputy. Guys, that is the end of question period. Thanks for tuning in. If you are not caught up to speed on Trudeau being investigated by the RCMP, then you might want to head to my main channel, Mistersunshinebaby, and you'll see the video breakdown there. It was just announced today, hence why the title of this live stream is what it is. That's where we're going to end it, guys. Thanks for, someone says in the comments, like an episode of Jerry Springer. Yeah, that was crazy. Holy crap, that was crazy. Don't forget on your way out to try and hit that like button, right? We got like 1,700 viewers. We've had over 10,000 viewers. It'd be nice if we got 1,000 likes. We're at 603 right now. So maybe, hit that like button. Play your part in this great fight here against the government. And yeah, I'd love to know what you guys think down below. Your favorite thoughts and moments of this live stream. And we'll be back tomorrow, same time tomorrow. Peace and love, everybody.